Good morning. Happy Monday. Welcome back to another week of e-learning. Um, in marking your activity 8 from Unit 2 on the weekend, I realized that we need a little histogram intervention. So I'm just going to go over how to create a histogram and show you some samples of student work to give you an idea of what a histogram should look like and what it shouldn't look like. So this is the question we're talking about from the assignment. Display each data set using a histogram and describe what each histogram is telling you about the data. So just to give you some examples, here is an example of a histogram that is done correctly. So along the x-axis, we have a continuous scale, and it's representing the actual data that this student is looking at. So the student's looking at points, and so that's along the x-axis, and then the y-axis is the frequency, or in this case, the number of players. So the axes have been labeled correctly, and there's a nice title, and the legend has been removed. So this is a good looking histogram. Here are some examples of what histograms should not look like. So this has the player names along the bottom. So this is a qualitative variable, and this is showing players and scoring percentages. So this is more of a two variable graph. And you notice that the bars are disconnected here, whereas up here they are connected because it's these are in intervals, and so that's not what a histogram should look like. Same thing here. This is again players along the x-axis, and the number of penalties that they got. Number of penalties should be along the x-axis. Same here. This is teams along the x-axis and number of points. This is the variable that the student is investigating, so the points should actually be down here on the x-axis. So just to show you quickly how to create those histograms again, it's just a one variable graph, so you only need to highlight one column to create the graph. So I'm going to do one for height. So I'm just highlighting my height column and inserting my chart. And it gives me a line graph option. I want to change that to a histogram. And then if I go into the Customize tab, I can change the titles. So if I just want to do height student, and then change my horizontal axis is fine to say height in centimeters, and then my vertical axis to be frequency. And then the other thing I can change is the bin width. So if I go into the histogram tab, it automatically chooses a bucket size, but you can have a smaller bucket size, which gives you more bars, or smaller or larger bucket size. You want to have about 5 to 10 bars in your histogram. So you want to adjust accordingly your bucket size so that you have the right number of bars. So this one looks pretty good. I've got 5 bars. It's showing which sort of intervals have the most students in them, and this is pretty typical for height data because you have the most common height for females and then the most common height for males. So you usually get this kind of two humps in your histogram to show those two modes or two most common heights. So that gives you a quick review of how to create a histogram. If you would like to go back into activity 8 and fix up your histograms if they weren't correct, you can resubmit them and I will reevaluate them. So you can do that. And otherwise, today you're working on activity 2 in unit 3. So you're doing the scatter plots for finding a friend and calculating the correlation coefficients both by hand and using technology. And so have a great day, and I will check in with you again tomorrow.